when you get to meet individuals and you hear their heart and their experience and the challenges and their cultural experience, I don't know, it's something that I think people really have to be more vulnerable in order to grow and to see how amazing God's wildflower arrangement of people is.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I think the vulnerability thing I think is really true. I It's interesting you say that because my pathway into greater interest in folks and greater maybe affinity for folks has been through some of the losses and
yeah,
and bad things of the last 10 years, but when I was a younger man, I had the curiosity, I think, but I didn't
yeah,
have the vulnerability. I thought everything
right,
was gonna be it was a performance. I was way more concerned about how I performed and how I came off, and if you're too concerned with that, then you're not really seeing the other person,
right.
and you just have
Yes.
to kinda just chill a little bit and ask questions and then just wait for the answer. I don't think I really learned how to do that until much later in life.
February 24th, 2026. Walking down a country road in eastern Tennessee near I-40. Parked at the Loves and took a break. And like I try to do if I can, walk. And if you can walk off of the truck stop, down the roads, the country roads, that works. That's great. It does this time. Sometimes it's just dark or rainy or freezing, but it's about 40 degrees, overcast, but dry. Not bad for a walk. And I'm walking along, looking at some rolling eastern Tennessee hills and the foothills of the Appalachians to the north here. See some fields that should have some cows in them, but they don't. There's an old farmhouse behind the Loves, still an operational farm. Looks like he sold off the front of his property, and that became the Loves. But he's still got a good bit of ground back here. Be good for farming or deer hunting or whatever you want to do. Looks like it's pretty fertile. Today, I was in the truck and woke up and had that feeling I often have is this is my life now. In a truck, away from my wife, working, not getting to see much on the road at all because truckers don't. There's no time to do anything other than drive and sleep. We do a typical trucker day is a 15-hour day. That's the day. You can work 14 hours, but you can stretch that by taking some breaks. My brother asked me, or somebody asked me today, if we get to see anything while we're traveling all over the place. I said, well, we can see out the windshield while the truck's rolling. There's no time, there's no downtime. It's just work and sleep and eat, which is fine. You make your money out here by trading time for money. Pretty straightforward. I used to trade knowledge for money and experience and industry experience for money, but now it's just time for money. That's fine. That's kind of how about maybe 40% of people out there make money. But I was thinking a little bit about loss, perspective, grace, and hope. And the loss part today was everything I've lost and thinking where I'd be now, calculating the exact amount my 401k would be now, retiring, etc. And I'm reminded of the fact that if you believe in the sovereignty of God as a Christian, you believe that He loves you and wants what's best for you, but you also know that the world is full of pain and suffering, and your own suffering and loss can be self-induced, which it was in my case. You have to put all that together and realize where you are now, what you're doing now, your future from here on out is what God wants for you, and it's the best thing for you at the end of the day. And so that helped me. It helped me get out of my head and remember those promises, biblical promises. Now, if you're not a Christian, I think you probably have to cast your lot with the universe or hope or human ability. But if you've been listening to this podcast for very long, you can realize that intelligence, skill, experience, and human ability certainly don't guarantee any particular outcome. So I did turn to thinking of the things I was thankful for. And there are many. There are many. Thankful for, well, for my faith, and that's what I ultimately put my hope in. But I'm really thankful temporarily for my wife, the grace that she's shown me in staying with me through some very difficult times and betrayal of trust, and then the long and probably rest of my lifelong process of trying to rebuild that trust. That's just plain old grace, being treated not as you deserve to be treated. So I'm thankful for that I have a partner to be with me for the rest of my life. I think she is too, but she had to really make a hard decision, knowing it may never get better, and to stay. So that's not just commendable. It's pretty superhuman and I think supernaturally driven by her faith. What else am I thankful for? Gosh, my children, all three of them, doing well. They're not all exactly where they want to be, but they're independent. They're out there. I'm proud of each one of them for everything that they are. I'm thankful for my church family and friends who stuck with me through tough times. I'm thankful for this job and the ability to make money, enough money to be able to save some for the future and, to be gainfully employed in something I enjoy doing. And I'm thankful for new things. And just this podcast is the first really new thing I've tried to create out of nothing. And it's exciting to me. Even if no more than 10 people ever hear this, I think it's more than worth it. And I'm reminded that a great antidote for anxiety and depression is to just do something. And the irony of it, or the tragedy or conundrum of anxiety and depression, is when you're really in the grips of it, not just a blue day, not just feeling bad about something, but really depressed and really anxious for, extended period of time. All you want to do, no matter what your circumstances, no matter how good the facts on the ground of your life are, is you want to just climb inside a dark box and stay there and have no one talk to you and no one bother you and just be totally alone and isolated. And if you've really suffered from depression or anxiety, you know that feeling. And if you don't, I'd say you've never really had serious depression. So the thing you need to do, of course, is to talk to people, engage with people, make a human connection, go touch grass, take a walk, etc. And even better, do something new, create something new. And this podcast for me is that. I'm very excited about that. So that's something I'm super thankful for too. So I hopefully this may help you if you're down or anxious. Lean into talking to other people. Let other people talk to you. Let them, grab you, maybe even physically, and take you for a walk or do a project or do something that has, a result, even if it's just the endorphins you get from exercising. So that's what I recommend. I wish I had done that many times in the past. I could have avoided some bad things. Hoping it's a good day for you and you get to touch grass. Hey everyone, it's Clint, the Ivy League trucker. Today's interview is with John Deaton. John's a friend of mine, and I've known him for about 5 years or so. And John talks at great personal depth about the power of vulnerability to open us up to other people and to allow us to empathize with them and for them to let their guard down and empathize and connect with us. That is something that is a very powerful thing. So I think you'll enjoy hearing about that in today's interview.
Hey everybody, it's Clint, the Ivy League trucker here, and today we're here with a good friend of mine who I've gotten to know better in the last few years, John Deaton. And John and I are members of the same church. John is both a musician and an educator. He's also a son of the South, but is
Mhm.
living up in Yankee Land these days,
Yeah.
and is also a strong family man. So, John, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Doing pretty good. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah. Hey, thanks so much. Appreciate it. So, so John, you are in a head of or principal role now, right? Out of school.
Yes, yes. Principal at a Christian school right in the center of Philly.
Okay. And what kind of does that serve a certain type of student population, or is it just more general?
But what's interesting is we're a missional Christian school.
Okay. So
Um,
what does that mean?
So that means that we don't require our students or their parents to actually, be believers or people who practice the faith of a Christian. We want to provide an opportunity for people to receive an excellent education at the same time, give them a glimpse of what it means to be a follower of Christ, and let them hear about the gospel. And
Okay.
but my campus we serve students from the sixth to 12th grade.
Okay.
And, yeah, this actually is a school that was started way back in 1978 by Paul Miller and Jim Petty, and, yeah, it's kind of morphed over time. It wasn't called the city school back then, but I think it was Spruce Hill Academy. But, yeah, so we are, you know, busy. This is my 2nd year as principal there.
Okay. And did you have an educational or teaching background before that?
I didn't go to school for education. It's kind of as you said, I don't what did you call it? Your Benjamin Button experience.
There you
I
go.
kinda I kinda did the same thing, with education, teaching and all of that. That wasn't the plan to begin with. But yeah, I taught for 6 years at Simon Gratz. But started out there as an emotional support classroom teacher and moved over after a couple of years into general education, and, you had to go through certification.
Right. Right.
And, I don't have an education degree, so I had to kinda jump through a whole bunch of hoops to, uh, to become certified as a ELA, teacher, and, did that for about 6 years. And, it was time to move on to a different setting, and I had an opportunity to go to work for this organization that provides support teaching, and it happened to be in this Christian school that I had never heard of. And, so I was introduced to the city school and got to work with small groups of students and help them grow in areas where they might have gaps in English, literature, and stuff.
Okay.
And, yeah, kinda
Okay.
started
Cool.
there.
Is it a big campus, or roughly how many
No,
students?
it's not big. It's not, extremely small. We have on our campus, we have about 125 students, and we have another campus that's K through 5, and they have about 72 students.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So, what would you say is the biggest difference from going from the teaching role to more the principal and administration role?
It's really I get to help teachers to grow. I we have this thing that we do. It's we create a deep hope. And my deep hope for my staff is that they will, grow in the gifts that God has given them and be able to develop them in such a way that they can really thrive and enjoy their work. And as a result, then students get an opportunity to also grow and to be introduced to Jesus all at the same time. So yeah, it's very different. And it's funny because I always told my wife I never wanted to be a principal. And
Really?
yeah, I didn't go for the position, that's for sure.
And so they approached you and asked you to do it.
They did.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it was definitely a God thing.
Okay.
It Yeah, caught me off guard a little bit.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's exciting. So, a couple years into it, and do you think that what's your sense? You think you're gonna be in this kind of role for a while?
Yeah, I hope so, Lord willing, again, I didn't think that this was something that was for me. I'm not the best administrator, or so I thought. I kind of had this understanding that you had to be a mover and a shaker, and like this super organized individual who is on top of everything, and
Right.
you have to be those things. But yeah, I'm finding that there's more humanness in it all, and it's very pastoral, which fits for
Okay.
me.
So tell me about that, kind of the human and pastoral side of it. Like, can you give us maybe, sanitized examples or something of how you felt like you're doing that?
Sure, sure. Like we really, we're striving to be a school that uses restorative practices and really, you know, doesn't. We need to provide consequences for things that our students do that
Sure.
are not
Mhm.
good for them and not good for our culture and environment. But we're trying to move away from this punitive model because we want our students to be equipped to learn how to deal with people who are different than they are, and have difference of opinions, and
Mm.
work through those things. So I have students who they react to certain teachers, and so there'll be this kind of blow up and verbal back and forth kind of thing, and the student is, I'm done with this, and you know uh, and I worked with another gentleman he's our dean of students. He's also a pastor, and
Okay. Okay.
so we work kind of hand in hand to take those situations and say, okay, well, because you crossed these lines and broke these rules, these are the consequences, and we give those. At the same time, we also require them to go through a process of, kind of mending those broken relationships and learning how to, helping the student learn how to meet the teacher where they are, and helping the teacher to be able to meet the student. Sometimes it's hard for adults even, to kind of give grace when it's needed. So we've been working on that, and the Lord's really shown up and showed us some really neat things about what he can do.
That's cool. I
Yeah,
remember
yes.
our oldest son was of the 3 children, the most challenging.
Mm,
He was very willful and oppositional, and he was at a they our guys went K through 5 at a local Christian school, Philmont Christian, and then they did
mhm,
public for middle school and high school, and that all worked out well. But I do remember many trips to the school, which was fairly close to my work, for
mhm.
him when the teacher, I got very familiar with the principal of that school, and Susan was her name, and she was
Mm,
great, and I always appreciated being able to wanna not only just deal with what had happened, but also what you're talking about, kind of the sense of restoration and the sense of, we're for you and we want you to be able to succeed, and also the relationships in the school. And then later there was another headmaster named Mark who really had a place for kind of the tough little boys. He had his heart for that, you could tell. So I was my wife and I were very thankful that that was that type of environment.
yeah,
Yeah, and I remember sidebar conversations with Sue after. I was like, "Okay, you can go to the car now, son. Now I'm gonna talk to the principal." And those were good conversations too, because she
yeah,
had a similar mindset, and it was nice. I always felt supported coming out of that, and I know
yeah,
often maybe parents don't necessarily feel it's supported when their kids acting out in school. So I
yeah.
I thought that was pretty cool. Now you're actually from Alabama, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
So
I
tell us a
am.
little bit about how you grew up and how you kinda got to where you are today.
Yeah, okay, so, yeah, I grew up in the northwestern corner of Alabama, the Muscle Shoals area. I'm the youngest of 3 siblings. Both my brother and sister are significantly older than I am. My brother's, like, 8 years older. My
Okay.
sister's 12 years older.
Oh, wow, 8 years older, that's a lot, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I was kind of both the youngest and then an only child from the time I was 9 on, because they got married young, as we
Mhm.
tend to do in the South, and
Okay.
never out of the house. So, it was interesting, growing up with both of those experiences, kinda doubly spoiled, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But, my family of origin is a typical Southern blue collar family, but I grew up in the church. My family, my dad was a deacon, and my mom and he both volunteered and worked with the children. My mom, coordinated the nursery. It was, and when I say so we didn't attend church as much as church was the hub of our lives, really.
Okay. Yeah.
That was where socialization occurred, and all of that.
Okay.
Yeah. Typical typical family. My dad was a mechanic. He worked for the Tennessee Valley Authority.
Oh, the
He
TVA.
actually
Yeah.
Yeah, TVA. So, like, from the time I was 3, that's when he started working there. And it's interesting because, I think about what I knew about my dad then, and then, I found out a whole bunch of stuff later on in my 30s when, I actually was smart enough to ask questions.
Yeah.
And my dad, actually had an 8th grade education. He had to drop out. He was born and raised in Mississippi, and he had to drop out of school to help pick cotton and make
Wow.
money.
Wow.
So he eventually stopped doing that and left Mississippi and took a train to Chicago, and just kind of did this adventurous thing, and ended up getting his GED. And
Okay.
so here he is, a man with an 8th grade education, working as a mechanic. And lo and behold, like I said, I didn't know this when I was younger, but he was actually working on experimental carburetors and designing a carburetor that could handle ethyl alcohol, basically,
Oh, wow.
grain alcohol, and was doing kind of these engineering things. And yeah. So there's that. My mom was pretty much a homemaker until I got old enough to be on my own, and then she used to cut hair a lot, so she went and got her license for cutting hair, and,
Okay.
made some money doing that. But yeah, that's kind of the setting that I was born in, and I was close to my parents back then.
Okay.
Our home was, like, very calm, very safe, and my dad was a very quiet man, meek and calm. We didn't have a lot of conversations, but he was always there. Like, he was a presence, and it was clear that he wasn't a weak person,
Mhm.
but there was not a lot of, "Hey, let me interject this into your life. Let's start a conversation
Mhm.
about." It was just, "I'm here," you know?
So
So
did you do stuff with him? I mean, like, activities with him, or is he just kinda present?
we worked. So,
Okay.
I mean, that's what he needed. He grew up on a farm, that's what you
Yeah.
do. So, we didn't grow up on a farm, but there's plenty of stuff to do.
Right.
We did yard work together, and he worked on cars, you know, on the side too, and so there would always be a car in our garage, and he was like, "Here, let's work on this. I need your help."
Yeah. Yeah.
So those are the kind of things that we did together. We weren't a, "Hey, let's go on vacation" kind of family, because
Okay. Okay.
you know we couldn't do that.
Got things
Too
to
much.
do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think
Um,
my wife grew up in a similar situation. Her dad had grown up at the Hershey Boys' School, actually, at an and in effect, his father died when he was young. He ended up at the Hershey Boys' School. His mother was semi-invalid. So it's kinda like being an orphan,
mm,
but that was a great experience for him, and it was all about hard work because they would send
yeah,
them to school. They would actually work farmettes where they lived, which you couldn't do now with child labor laws, but,
right.
um, yeah, like, she grew up on a big farm. He was an engineer, but there was always things to do, and it
Yeah,
was just, kinda a little bit of the gospel of hard work
yeah,
there, and it was always, and then when it got to when our kids started going there, it affected them too, because it was always like, "Okay, we're having a work day. We are working until it's done, and
right.
then if we have time and daylight, then we might have a little fun, but, the work comes first."
Yeah,
Yeah, that kinda attitude. I know it had a big impact on my oldest son.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
My
you grow up now, did you go off to college or did you what'd you do?
so there was a the University of North Alabama was in my hometown.
Okay.
I was not a good student. I was I was one of those undiagnosed ADHD
Oh, really? Okay.
children, and I wasn't like the hyperactive kind, I was just inattentive.
Yeah, okay.
And so, it was my all the comments on all my reports were like, "John's not focused, he's stares out the window, there was
Mhm.
even one that was that John is not college material. And so they didn't put me on a college track, but I wanted to go to college, so I was like fortunately, the University of North Alabama at the time, it had an open door policy, so it didn't matter that I wasn't prepared, in that sense.
So
And,
they let you come and show up.
yeah, they let me come and show up as long as I gave them money. And so my parents didn't have a college education. My brother, he had an associate's degree from a technical institute there in the area. My sister had started college, but then she got married and they moved on. And so my family didn't have a lot of experience with, hey, here's how you prepare for college.
Right.
And here's how you can be a successful student. So my family very much was like, hey, you do what you do, and if you're a C student, then you're a C student, and be happy about that. So
Mhm. Mhm.
I I definitely was like, oh, okay, the bar's not very high, and okay, I can handle that. Yeah, that came back to bite me in the rear end a lot later on in life, but I stayed in my hometown. I lived in the basement of my parents' house. It wasn't a finished basement, and so my dad and I built walls and, you know, made it into a room for me.
Okay.
And, so I stayed there my first 2 years, really, of college, and, wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I loved music. Music was something that was, like, a part of me. I didn't grow up in a musical family or anything, but it was just something that I don't know, it was just always there,
Uh-huh.
something that I felt and, the need to express and all of that, so I decided to start majoring in commercial music, learning how to work in the studio and such.
So that was your way into music, is working in a commercial studio.
It actually wasn't. It was that was my plan,
Oh, okay.
but the more I thought about it, when I discovered I'm gonna be working in the middle of the night most nights, and
Right.
I wanted a family, and I wanted kind of a normal life, and so I was like, "Oh, okay, because 'cause I'm not gonna do that." And so I moved to a general music major,
Okay.
went that route.
Gotcha.
Um,
Okay.
yeah.
So you finished school, then what happened?
Well, I didn't finish, and that I'm one of those people that crammed 4 years of college into 6.
Ah, uh-huh. That's a well-trodden path, yes.
Yeah. It was I spent a couple of years doing that. I felt God calling me into ministry. Again, I was still very active in my church. I love to sing. I was part of an ensemble at the Baptist Student Union there at the college. Ended up the director of the Baptist Student Union asked me to direct the choir,
Wow,
to
okay.
put together a choir of college, and I was like, "What? I've never directed a choir. What are you talking about?" He shoved me in there and said, "Go to it," and I figured it out. And so those kinds of experiences helped me build confidence that I didn't have.
Yeah,
'Cause I
sink or
was not
swim. Yeah.
Yeah, it really was. It was like and these were individuals who it's like, when you see potential in somebody and you're like, that they're just scared to death and you just have
Uh-huh.
to throw them in the pool.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Eh, that happened a lot in my life.
Gotcha.
People are like, "Hey, do this." So I really wanted some biblical training, and at that time, also, I met or reintroduced myself to this young lady who was who was very she caught my eye, and
Mhm.
she was not from Alabama. And she was from Brazil,
Okay, so
and
how does a girl from Brazil get to North Alabama?
that that is a plot twist that only God could create. The director of the counseling department at the University of North Alabama happened to
Uh-huh.
have been a missionary to Brazil
Okay.
a long time ago, And so she retired from there and ended up moving to my hometown and, teaching there.
Okay.
My wife, whose name is Deborah, her father wanted to go to Westminster Seminary, and so in 1986, they moved from Brasilia to Philadelphia,
Oh,
so he
wow.
could go to
Okay.
Westminster.
Okay.
But Deborah, instead of moving here first, she went down to Alabama to live with her grandmother for a year. That
Okay.
that was kind of the deal because they didn't have a lot of contact with her. And
Sure.
every child was gonna stay with her for a year, so it was her turn.
Okay.
So she went to the same high school that I did
Wow.
for a whole semester. This is my wife, she had already done everything that we do in high school when she got there, and she was only in the 10th grade in Brazil, so they said, "Hey, you need to take English and some other things, but you've already taken all the math and sciences and everything that we offer here."
Right.
And so she went to high school for a semester and then graduated, you know, and early and went off to college. So,
And so when she got
she
to college, that's when she caught your eye.
well, she caught my eye then, and so here's the thing, I grew up a good Southern Baptist, young man, and we were always taught to, only date potential mates, right?
Right.
And I thought she was a foreign exchange student. Like, I knew her, I had lunch with her a couple of times. She was a really neat individual, but I'm like, "Yeah, but she's gonna be gone," so
Uh-huh.
I'm not even gonna start with. Well, then I found out 2 years later that she was actually still in the country, and she would come back to visit her grandmother, and, I started going to a church, and I didn't know at the time that that's the church that she went to, and so she showed up again, and I was like, "Oh,
There you go.
that's Debbie Gomez." Yeah, so that's when we started actually being interested in one another and hanging out in groups, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And,
Okay. Okay.
eventually we started dating. We dated for 2 years before we ended up getting married.
Wow.
But yeah. But the thing about being called to the ministry and getting kind of some Bible education while we were dating, and I was this very reserved individual. I didn't communicate a lot, and
Mhm.
she was like, "Okay, we're dating, it seems like," a and then I'm like, "Well, I I'm applying to go to a school down in Florida because I feel called to ministry and I wanna get some biblical training, but I don't wanna go down to Florida without you.
Mhm.
But I can't marry you right now." And she was like, first of all, she was like, "What?" Y We go from, "I'm not sure if we're dating," to, "I can't be without you," you know?
Right.
Um, so I actually ended up I went down to a Baptist theological college down in Florida. She actually moved down there and lived with some, uh, mutual friends and kind of established herself there as a person of interest. She had
Mhm.
her apartment and she had a little job working at a restaurant, and
Okay.
she had already graduated from PCB with a degree in counseling, but here
Okay.
she is at a restaurant hanging out in Florida.
Her
But
dad's a pastor, right?
yeah, well, her dad was a pastor. He was a speaker and a writer. He translated all of Francis Schaeffer's works into Portuguese.
Wow.
He's like,
Wow.
yeah, amazing, amazing man. But yeah, so we were down in Florida for a while, and my parents had always said, "You can't get married until you can support fully your wife.
Right.
You won't have our blessing unless you do that."
So practical
So
advice. Right. Yeah.
yes, very practical advice. But it ended up God provided this job at a church as a youth and music director, and they gave me a trailer to live in behind the church.
Oh boy. There you go.
So I was like, "Huh, I have a house. I get paid. I can
Right.
pay the bills, and we could get married." And so, yeah, so we ended up getting married in June of '91.
Wow.
But, this whole idea of connecting with people who are different, that
Yeah,
you
tell us about that.
I've always been intrigued by different cultures. I mean, growing up in the church, we always every Wednesday we had this thing called Mission Friends, and we would
Mhm.
go and learn about missionaries and what they do, and learn about the culture and food, and all those things were just so interesting to me.
Yeah, we had that
And
too. We had that too, and I remember one thing I think for folks who may be listening to this who don't come from a church background,
mm,
I was growing up I'm a little bit older than you, in the '70s and '80s,
mhm,
and I remember we had a lot of missionary connections too,
yeah,
and we would get information from them, and then they would come back, every 4 or 5 years, they would come back and do a sabbatical or something, and we'd hear from them, and you
right,
actually, as a young person growing up, were very aware of different parts of the world and
right,
different cultures because of the Christian missions aspect of it, more so than I think a lot of the folks who weren't church, who are a little bit more American-centric, and that's I just come full circle as an adult and having traveled around the world and done various jobs, I'm like, yeah, at a fairly young age, you can get exposed to that because of the missions aspect. It's kind of interesting.
yeah. Yeah, and that kinda set me up to be really, intrigued and curious and wanting to find out and meet people from different places. That's not what you hear when people talk about Alabama. They kinda give this impression of this very narrow and not
Mhm.
open-minded individuals kinda thing, but it's like the reality of, uh, people from all walks of life have such very different experiences and different traditions. And a lot of the challenge today with you have to be sure that you are not trying to what's the term, assimilate. Yeah,
Mm.
you have to be respectful and not. But in terms of being curious and asking questions and wanting to know more, that's really the heart of connecting and relationship. And those are the things I think that caused Deborah and I to travel around, live in different states. I mean, as soon as we got married, about 6 months into marriage, I had not finished my degree yet, but I was like, "Okay, I've lived in the South my whole life. I need to have a different experience, and I need to see if my faith will last
Oh, okay.
outside of the buckle of the Bible Belt."
Right, right.
And
Okay.
so we said, "Hey, I have an idea. Let's move to Boston."
Wow.
And that's
That's a
where her
change of
parents
pace.
had moved there, and her dad was pastoring a Brazilian church, immigrant church in Boston.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so we did.
So what was that
And
like for I mean, Boston and Massachusetts culturally is very different than the South.
yeah, it was very different. It took me a while to understand the language. And everything was much more fast paced there.
Right.
Um,
Yep.
and I had to learn you can't be as friendly there because they look at you with suspicion if you're an overly friendly. So some
Mhm.
people stay in their lane, and so I had to learn some of the culture.
Yep.
And you hear all the stories in the South. There's always Yankees, and they're like this and they're like that. And but what's really cool is to just get to meet individuals and hear their story. And so we started attending the church that my father-in-law was pastoring, but it was a co-op church of 5 different denominations from 5 different countries.
Wow.
And so they would meet separately each week, and then, once every 2 months, they would come together for a joint worship, and they would share food, and so it was just this cultural extravaganza for me that I had never experienced before.
But that's great because that's exactly what you were looking for.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was very exciting. We didn't have children yet, so we were broke, and it didn't matter. Because there's always something to do in Boston. You just go to the subway and you hear students practicing, trying to get a couple of dollars playing in the subway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, just really seeing the richness of different cultures and diversity, getting to know. We attended the American church also because I didn't speak Portuguese at all at that time.
Okay.
So we attended the Brazilian church, and I was trying my best to follow along, and we did that for a couple of years. But
Wow.
the pastor of the American church, he was a widower. He lost his wife late in life and remarried. And when you get to meet individuals and you hear their heart and their experience and the challenges and their cultural experience, I don't know. It's something that I think people really have to be more vulnerable in order to grow and to see how amazing God's wildflower arrangement of people is.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I think the vulnerability thing I think is really true. I It's interesting you say that because my pathway into greater interest in folks and greater maybe affinity for folks has been through some of the losses and
yeah,
and bad things of the last 10 years, but when I was a younger man, I had the curiosity, I think, but I didn't
yeah,
have the vulnerability. I thought everything
right,
was gonna be it was a performance. I was way more concerned about how I performed and how I came off, and if you're too concerned with that, then you're not really seeing the other person,
right.
and you just have
Yes.
to kinda just chill a little bit and ask questions and then just wait for the answer. I don't think I really learned how to do that until much later in life. Yeah, so, okay, so you're in Boston, and then what happens?
Mhm. So we had moved up there, and I was gonna go to Gordon College.
It's north of Boston there, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and I lasted a whole semester there. I was like, uh, I realized what small fish I was, you know? Grew up singing music, like I said, was just a part of me. You introduced me as a musician. I don't know that I would call myself a musician. I mean, yeah, I play some instruments. I sing. I had vocal training in college. That was a degree in music, but music, it never became like a profession.
Okay.
My relationship with music is more like music has been my friend from birth. So music is like, I don't know, it's like a body part, a major body part that I've used to sense and feel and understand the things that don't make sense
Huh,
to the
okay.
rest of my senses. That connection through music, I love Brazilian culture, and the thing that I connected with was the music, the bossa nova and the MPB stuff, all the things that kind of talk about the history and culture of Brazil. So music, I see it. People say the universal language of music, and that's true.
Right.
Um, but I think really being able to see and hear beauty in created things and to share that and to experience that both ways of to share my own with people and to
Uh-huh.
to receive that from others. It's a unique conduit, I think, for connecting. um, Early on I had friends that we made who were Brazilian, who didn't speak English and I didn't speak Portuguese, but they
Mhm.
were musicians and we would just sit and play, and, and we were believers, so we had this connection that was there, but it wasn't something that it's like, "Oh, I have information about this person," and we had
Yeah.
these great conversations. It's like, yeah, it's something different. It's hard to explain.
I guess what I hear you saying is on the music side, music is that universal language, and it's kinda like a space maker for people to be together.
Yeah.
And when it would be very hard to create space, especially across language differences and
Yeah.
cultural differences. I'm a dabbler. I was in the church choir, and then I played baritone horn through high school,
Yeah.
but it was it's just there's a certain discipline to it, right? You gotta have certain musical discipline, and it allows people to create a space for people to share, and it does communicate and relate a lot of things which they're not in words,
Yeah.
but they're definitely real and important and part of the human condition. Yeah, I definitely think that. I remember my mom was the church organist when I was little. I still remember on Saturday afternoons when she'd go practice and she'd give me the blocks to play with, and I remember turning around and looking at her bare feet on the pedals. She
Mhm.
would kick her shoes off. She was
Yeah.
She was a very proper Southern woman from Alabama
Right.
as well, and we were up in Yankee land where I grew up, but I will never forget just hearing the organ and watching her bare feet, which I never got to see my mother's bare feet, right?
Right.
Her bare
Yeah.
feet dancing on the pedals, the organ pedals,
Yeah.
and then, she would play on Sundays, and then we would have hymn sings. We had a baby grand piano that was like her most special thing in the house that my dad had gotten her, and we would even late in her life, she would be like, "Come over here and let's sing," and
Yeah.
just sing some songs together, and that was always very precious to me is the musical connection with my mother.
Yeah. That's neat. And
Yeah,
that
yeah,
is precious. Yeah.
yeah.
Those things. It's interesting because my family was not a musical family,
Mhm.
but my my mother mostly was the one who kind of pushed for me to like take piano lessons and at least be
Uh-huh.
exposed, that kind of stuff.
Right,
But I always felt a little like the odd person in my family because I like in church, I like to hang around and listen to the adults and kind of learn from them. So some of that intergenerational piece,
right,
and the environment that I grew up in allowed for that. We would have people come over after church, and they would do the Sara Lee pound cake and coffee kind of thing,
right, sure.
and we would sit around and as a kid, I was allowed to stay in the room and
Wow.
just listen, and they would ask me questions, and so really learning uh, the biblical concept of the older teaching the younger was an experience that was very rich for me and really helped me understand that I mattered, that I was
Mhm.
somebody worth talking to, and I didn't get that all the time.
No, kids
Um,
often don't get it at all.
right, right.
Right.
So it's interesting you should mention the piece about vulnerability and really being able to focus on other people rather than the performance because
Uh-huh.
growing up performing, I've been singing in church since I was 6, and so performing was easy for me, and, when you begin to use performance to hide things, to
Mm,
hide sin, then you become a very guarded person, and so
mm.
it's interesting because
Is that how it played out for you personally? Music became it was a way to hide things, or was that just you
it
observed
was
that?
it was part of it. When you have music, you have a script, you have something to hide behind.
Right,
It can
right.
be a persona. Hey, I'm the guy who plays the guitar and sings, and that carries over into other areas, that performance mentality. So it's like,
Mhm,
okay, if I keep people at a far enough distance, then they don't see the ugly part of me,
mm,
the things that are bad about me that I don't want anybody to know.
mhm,
And so when you live that way, guarded, and it is really hard to form bonds with people.
mm,
And so there was some pretty significant sin in my life that I was hiding from everybody for most of my life. So it doesn't just affect me, it affected my relationship with my wife. It affected
mhm,
my relationship with my children and with my family and everybody else. It's interesting because there came a point where it was clear that I needed to bring that stuff out
mm,
and
okay.
bring it out to the light and say, "Look, here's my mess. This is the real me. No performance here. This is raw and ugly me." And that was really hard. Something
Pretty
that
scary too, I bet.
yeah, it was extremely scary. I mean, it took me until I was in my 50s to do that, and in one sense, I wish that I had done it earlier, but at the same time, I know that I wasn't ready,
Right,
right?
yeah.
And so the timing was right, and it was bad. It was ugly. It was a blow up. I almost lost my marriage. It has had an impact on my children and choices that they've made, but the reality of not being guarded and not having agendas and really giving me the ability to see a person, to
Mhm,
really see them and hear them and care about them and have empathy for them I'm not busy trying to figure out how to keep them from finding out this horrible stuff about me. It's like, okay, that stuff is out of the way, and now I'm free to really connect with people and to hear them. And I don't have to go around telling people my story and all my business.
Mhm.
Um, at the same time, I'm not worried about it because it's something
Yeah.
it's removed from me. God has taken that and He's forgiven me, and I'm a free man,
So how
and it's
long
allowed me
so
to.
how long have you
Yeah,
kinda lived in that state of, "Okay, we've gotten this out there, and now I'm able to focus on other people?"
it's been yeah, it's been about 6 years,
Okay.
almost
Okay.
7 years.
Wow.
It's been a lot of work. It's not something that's like, oh, I confessed major sin and now everything has been peachy. It's like
Right.
I I have become an honest person, and I've owned the things. So it's affected the way that I communicate. It's affected the way that I go around. I used to be secretive. I used to, you know, always be wondering if anybody knew what I was doing and all
Mhm.
those things.
It's kind of exhausting.
It is exhausting.
Yeah.
So now it's like, oh, okay, people may have a negative opinion of me based
Mhm.
on what they know, and I'm okay with that because you know they probably should, and if they don't, then thank God
Yeah.
for that grace. And so I'm actually, my marriage is stronger than it's ever been.
That was my next question. How has it
Yeah.
affected your marriage and your relationship with your kids?
It's affected my relationship and my marriage because I was performing, I was basically creating this fake me, and my wife
Interesting.
was, she adored that. I allowed her to make me an idol and, and basically put me on a pedestal because here I'm this guy who's just does everything right. Uh, Unfortunately, I'm a very good performer, and so what that ends up doing is it causes me to just not be what's I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, authentic.
Mhm.
And so I set this thing up where she really saw me as this amazing godlike person. She'll say that. I'm not my words, right?
Right.
What it's done is it's really helped her to then accept the the other people in her life who haven't lived up to her standards,
Oh, interesting. So
who have
it's
hurt
given
her,
her
who have.
more empathy towards others.
Yes, it's given her an ability you know, to go, "Okay, it's clear that everybody is broken." And so the challenge to really go, "Okay, I'm in love with somebody who's not the greatest guy in the world anymore."
Mhm.
So initially it was really hard,
Oh, yeah.
to hear those things. But as we've worked through, and I had to work through a lot. It's not like I confessed and then everything changed. Still the same person. I'm still
Mhm.
a fallen being. You know, I sin, but I'm able to be honest. I'm able to come to my wife and I go, "Hey, I I messed up.
Mhm.
Here's how I messed up," or, "This is how I'm feeling right now, and I know it's wrong, but I feel this way." So it's allowed us to see each other as the human beings that we are. You know?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities with my in the church, we call them sin patterns or
Mhm.
dysfunctionalities or even pathologies of,
Right.
like, when things started to go sideways and I was failing, and I was failing both judgmentally, like good judgment, poor judgment, and I was
Mhm.
also failing morally. I was doing some things that were morally wrong. The performer, everything's gotta be perfect in me, there's this sense where you just keep trying to hide it. The worse it
Right.
gets, the more inward you turn because there's nowhere to go because you can't talk to
Yeah.
anybody about it because that would pierce the performance bubble, and then it just gets worse and worse. And
Right.
yeah, yeah, I think I experienced a lot of that too. And but you step away from it, you're like, gee, you're human, you're fallible, you're a sinner, and that is not shocking to your spouse, or at
Yeah.
least shouldn't be. And but
Right.
we're so afraid that we'll be rejected, quite frankly.
Right.
If we show this bad side of us, and then it just actually makes it worse. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of the vulnerability piece, I think that's we could camp out on that for a long time,
Absolutely.
Well, thank you
Yeah.
for being vulnerable and sharing that,
Uh,
but I think it has a lot to do with this idea of empathy, because it's kinda
yeah.
like when you say, "Hey, guess what? I'm messed up too," that lowers the temperature with other people. It's like,
Right.
oh, okay, now we're not all just pretending that we're all okay here,
Yeah.
and now we can get a little more real with each other, and then they'll tell you something that maybe they've been struggling with or just a hurt they have that's hard to talk about, and then you can be more genuine with them because 'cause you're not pretending you're on some pedestal above them. Because guess what? You're not.
Exactly.
Um,
Well, and that's the thing when you think about, like, growing up, I wish there had been some male in my life who was honest enough to say, "Hey, these are some areas of struggle.
mhm,
I'm a believer. I'm in the church. I am, you know, but there's struggles and
mm,
and they're ongoing. If there had been that conversation, unfortunately, I'm in a church right now. We go to the same church where that happens.
yeah.
Um, but it seems to be rare. I don't know. I haven't experienced every
I
church,
I
right?
think it's still fairly rare, especially for
Yeah,
men especially for men. Yeah.
yeah. So really being able to, if we are honest and if we can speak truth in love, it's gonna help the generation that comes after us and after them. It's gonna help the generations that are ahead of us who may have trouble expressing those things. It's
Yeah.
like to hear somebody else say, "Hey, I mess up. I mess up a lot. I mess up in ways that I don't really want to tell people about, but here it is." And and that doesn't mean that now everybody has left me and I'm alone.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's the fear, really. It's
That
like,
is the
okay,
ultimate fear. The ultimate
it
fear
is.
is to be abandoned,
Right.
to be rejected,
Yeah.
to say, "I'm broken, and guess what? You're gonna judge me as broken, and you're gonna discard me."
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
where we down I think it's a very deep human fear for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I know that I couldn't do the job that I'm doing now as a principal if I hadn't gone through that experience and whatever the sanctification process 6 years ago, because I have to model. I have to be a person who is okay with messing up in front of people.
Mm,
Being I was wrong. I said this and I shouldn't have, or this needed to be done and I forgot. Those were things that I never would have admitted to. I would cover up. So it's like that
wow.
self-preservation, I think, is a relationship killer. It really
Interesting.
is.
Yeah, it is,
Yeah.
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 Yeah, it's interesting for you to say that because it's like typically a principal, if you're a kid in school, they're the authority figure, and it's either a relationship of either you're pushing against the authority because that's kinda human nature, or you're scared of the authority
Right.
or whatever, but all of those reactions don't create any connection, right?
Right. Right.
And I think there's a lot of ways, like we all had maybe a coach in a sport or a teacher who somehow they connected with us. And it
Yeah.
typically was either they were sharing their heart, like my history teacher, Mr. Fogarty, he was an awesome storyteller. And he was
Yeah.
so into the storytelling of history, he made it fun. And
Oh, wow.
that was the way in, right?
Yeah.
Or Mr. Clare, my English teacher, he loved the literature so much that his passion for the stories and the literature came through, and that was the way in. And for both of
Yeah.
them, they were both kinda like not being formal didactic teachers, they were just being people who loved this thing,
Right.
and that was how we connected,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
but the principal, I was still scared of him.
Yeah. Well, I try not to be too scary, but yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
have that authority and, know that the buck stops with me. And it's interesting because that's the thing that I always ran from. I never wanted to be the one who was ultimately responsible for anything. And and fortunately, there's someone above me, and fortunately, there's God who's above all of us.
Right.
But
We all
you
gotta
know,
serve we all gotta serve somebody.
exactly, exactly. But there is a lot of responsibility that I
Sure.
carry,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's yeah, it's a lot, but at the
Well,
same time, yeah,
yeah, that's so cool, I think, on the vulnerability piece, how it relates to the job,
yeah,
and also is seems to be giving you a heart for the kids as, in this what you talked about of modeling, "Hey, there are consequences to actions. We're not gonna, like, walk away from that."
right,
But there's the relationship piece that we're calling you to restore that relationship with that student or with that teacher because you don't get to walk away from that either, which is maybe the missing piece so many times. Well, that's really cool. Well, I think we covered a lot, John. I really
yeah.
appreciate your vulnerability, that the vulnerability piece and how that relates to relating to people. I think that's super valuable for folks listening. I'm going to move us to a quick lightning round. What, you ready?
All right, ready as I'll ever be, I guess.
All right, let's do it. Favorite thing to read that's not work related?
Did I I really have been reading a lot of C.S. Lewis.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Okay. He's
yeah,
the
I,
Christian author C.S. Lewis. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's my goal for this year is to try to read as many of his books as possible. So
What's
I've
the,
started
what's the,
started over again with Mere Christianity.
well, that's a good place to start. Christianity, I was listening to that one. That was originally lectures on the radio or radio talks during World War II. Your
Oh yeah, yeah,
Christianity, yeah.
exactly.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Okay. Very first place you saw your wife?
Well, the very first place I saw her was in the lunchroom at school,
Okay.
but the very first place that I saw her and my eyes lit up was
Yeah.
in church. Yeah,
Oh, yeah?
yeah.
Okay. Strangest things one of your kids ever said to you?
This is strange in one sense. So both my oldest are on the spectrum for autism. My
Okay.
middle son, Tim, is also developmentally delayed. And, we've educated them on, their disabilities and all that. So they've been very aware of things. But when my wife was pregnant with my youngest son, Jonathan, who's 10 years younger than Timothy,
Ok
we were in church and I was pastoring and I was asking for prayer requests, and Timothy raises his hand. So Timothy's like, you know, 9 years old at the time. And I'm like, "Oh, okay, Tim, what's your prayer request?" He says, he raised his hand and he said, "I want to pray that my son will not, that my brother, that when he's born, he will not be disgusting like me."
Whoa!
And, and it just like broke my heart. I was
Oh,
like,
yeah.
"Oh my word, have we you know, does our child feel like he's disgusting because, of his disability and all those things, right?"
Yeah, yeah.
Well, so I can't, I can't talk anymore, and and my wife is, feeling awful. Well, it turns out what he was talking about was before church, he'd been picking his nose, and his mom and my wife was like, "Stop doing that. That's disgusting."
There you go. Very immediate for the nine-year-old.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
Yeah, very
Uh,
immediate for them.
so yeah,
Who's, your favorite band?
YouTube,
You too. Yeah.
YouTube, always
They're
has
up
been.
they're up there for me, just
Yeah,
the depth of what they've been talking about all these years. Yeah,
yeah,
it's pretty cool stuff, and I do like the Edge's playing, so
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
which is pretty darn unique. Well, John, I think
Uh-huh.
we covered quite a bit here, but I think your themes of curiosity to
Mhm.
find out about other people and other cultures, coming from humble beginnings and you end up married to a Brazilian woman. Who would have thought of that?
Who would've thought?
Who would have thought? And then also your sense of vulnerability and how that opens the door to connection with other people. I think that's something we haven't talked about on the podcast. I think that's
Mm.
pretty cool. I do appreciate your vulnerability even on the pod here talking about it. It's good stuff. So thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate you letting me be on here, and
Yeah.
I
Any parting shots for the folks out there?
um, I think just really looking at other people with compassion and trying to what I always think about the smaller catechism and what we are designed to be, that we are to, you know, serve God, to enjoy Him forever, to love God and enjoy Him forever. And I think if we can keep those things in front of us, yeah, then our experience of other people will be rich, and we'll be able to, glean from one another rather than find the differences in one another and argue. I think that we live, as we all know, things are very divisive right now. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, it doesn't have to be.
No, it
So,
doesn't.
yeah.
It certainly doesn't. Well, thank you, John.
Thank you.
Yeah, all right, brother.
Sounds good.
All right, bye.
Take care.
I really appreciate John's openness and candor in talking about his story and his journey, especially the two elements that I think are so helpful and powerful for empathy and connection. First, his personal curiosity about people and wanting to know about people who are different than him for different cultures and backgrounds and situations. Coming from North Alabama and an innate curiosity about people, I think that's really can be very powerful. And then secondly, and even maybe more powerfully, the power of vulnerability, the power of admitting that you're wrong and that you've got to make amends for some things and you've got to change your ways. And being honest with people, especially the people in your life that you're closest to about that and how powerful that is to create real connection and also just change the way you are with people. I think there's a lot of similarities in John's story and mine over the last 10 years or so that I had to really let go of a lot of performance and trying to look my best in front of everybody type stuff in order for me to really see people. So I don't know about you if you struggle with that or have struggled with that, but I think John's story is very, very powerful and instructive for us in that way. Well, until next time, keep that shiny side up. Clint, the Ivy League trucker. Take care.